begin opening the lamp of non-dual knowledge. This is the book. It has another covering, a newer version covering, and the first chapter is on superimposition, and in a simple way, superimposition is the mind superimpose attributes on an object that the objects don't even have. Means if the mind gets a car, it is happy. If the mind loses the car, it is unhappy. So it superimposed happiness and unhappiness on the car. The car is a piece of metal, plastic. It doesn't have any happiness or unhappiness. The mind superimposed it on it. Yet the superimposition appears like it is on an object, yet the superimposition actually happens on the self, on the beingness of who you are. Because superimposition happens in the field of awareness, which is the self. So it's only superimposed on the self, and it apparently appears that it is on an object. That's an illusion. So in this chapter where he begins, he starts, greatly afflicted by three kinds of distress, intensely seeking release from bondage, so as to be free from his painful existence. A disciple distinguished by long practice of the fourfold sadhanas approaches a worthy master and prays. It's interesting because he begins that the disciple is in pain and is in distress, and it really has a burning yearning or something drives it, obviously. That's why pain, if we just understand that pain is not a bad thing, and it's a catalyst for waking up, then any time there is fear, pain, distress, anxiety, reactivity, now it's what the mind's attitude it's gonna do with it. Is it gonna be a victim of it, or is it gonna use it to wake up from this dream? Because it appears that there is real pain or real suffering, yet in fact there isn't real suffering, because what's caused suffering is thoughts, and there are no real thoughts, therefore there is no real suffering. Yet when there appears like there is suffering, then disappearance is the opportunity to wake up from it. Now he continues, he says, Master, ocean of mercy, I surrender to you, pray save me. Obviously he's not surrendering to a human being, because the master represents for him the self. So he is surrendering the mind to the self, which is his true nature. What happens for most beings, they mistake, they think they surrender to another person, because from the point of view of I am a physical body, that's what I perceive. I perceive another object in front of me. So in the beginning I surrender to the apparent object, person. Yet this teaches the mind, or trains the mind, or gets the mind to understand to truly surrender to the self. This is where there's a lot of misunderstanding of devotion, serving the master, or some disciples point and say, this master is so great. What is so great about the master? It's his physical form, his appearance, the way he walks, the way he talks. What is it? Is the words that are shared from him? Is the presence? What's so great? There's only one thing that is great, is the presence of the beingness of who you are. And it is not the master's presence nor your presence, it's the only presence that is real, which is your real nature. It's not personal or individual. It has no divisions. It's not his, mine, others. It alone exists as one presence, as the presence. It's not even one presence. Also, another thing that happens that is great is words that are bridge for the mind to return to the self. So again, words is thoughts, and the words of wisdom or knowledge cannot be personal. So it's not my knowledge or someone's knowledge, because knowledge is universal. So it can meet the mind, which is one mind, and direct it back to the self, the source. Therefore, one has to be very vigilant and alert that when somebody says he or she is so great, what is it? Because as an appearance, I'm not important. I'm not great. There's one thing that is great, which is real, the presence of who you are. And it has nothing to do with form nor name, because it's formless and nameless. The words can be just aid. So if someone doesn't recognize the presence and cannot fix the attention on that, at least use the words. So the words point the mind until there is a sense of presence that can be recognized.
It's also the clear mind. It's not just presence. It's also the clarity and the pure mind that is what's attracted to the apparently guru.
Yes, as an aid. Yet even the words and the clear mind, it's not the greatness itself. Because even the words can be either accepted or negated. And it depends which mind perceives it. So one would say this is nonsense. The other one, it would say this is the greatest. One would say this is false. And the other one would say this is the truth. Yet the presence cannot be accepted nor negated. So that's the greatness itself. So the words are just pointers. This is why the most important for one is to be familiar with the language, the only real language, which is silence, which is absolutely still. This is the most important language to be familiar with. Yet this language cannot be spoken. It can be just experienced because it is everyone's nature. And now the master says, save you from what? And the disciple, from the fear of reoccurring birth and death. Basically, the disciple is afraid of identifying with the thoughts. Because birth and death, past is birth and death is future. An identification with the thoughts as an ego, a separate entity, is occupied basically with past and future, past and future, past and future. Birth and death, birth and death. And if the mind keep dwelling on this, this is basically planting the seeds for what they call samsara, birth and death, the cycle. And that cycle is yesterday and tomorrow. And then the master say, leave that samsara and fear not, and fear not. Leave it alone and don't be afraid. Leave it alone means don't fix the attention on that. And when you don't fix the attention on that, there is no fear. Because when the attention on that and the mind projects the future, it starts to scare itself. Even the notion of I'm not going to be free. If someone doesn't question that thought, they don't realize that that thought is not you regardless. Who you are is already free. It's who you are is freedom itself, and then a thought appears in that field of freedom and says, I would not be free. These thoughts are empty. They are not real. They are not even related to anything. It's just a conceptual image imagining itself as an object on a subtle, in the field that is already free. Therefore, I won't be free. One has to ask, is this thought me? Or who I am even have a thought like that? Am I thinking the real I? Is it really thinking? Does it really care? Does it have a preference? So if this can be seen, I won't be free. And one would ask, is it real? And when that thought disappears, what remains is me, not as a thought. And then it's to fix the attention on that. Recognize that as you. He continues, the disciple, unable to cross this vast ocean of samsara. I fear reoccurring birth and death, so I have surrendered to you. It is for you to save me. Basically, he says, unable to cross this vast ocean of samsara. See, this vast ocean does not really exist. I just imagine it, and then I try to cross it. And then I fear reoccurring birth and death. This is again he's speaking from, he is identifying himself as a physical body. So I have surrendered to you, it is for you to save me. Here again he's pointing, I have surrendered to you means what? To a physical form that sits in front of him? To the mind? Or to the self? So the only real surrender is to you, which is your true nature, to the self. There is no other surrender. Now, the mind can surrender to reality, what is, because when the mind surrenders to what is, basically there's no reactivity, so there's no desire, no wanting. Then it's an entrance point as well to the self. Yet it's an entrance point to leave it alone. The Master: what can I do for you? The disciple: save me, I have no other refuge. This is already when a disciple or a mind that is mature says or thinks it and understands it. This is really an important step for the mind to realize, because he says, save me, I have no other refuge, means he's talking to the self. Means he realized there is no other refuge than the self. Means there is no refuge in identifying with the thoughts, and there is no refuge in the dream, and there is no refuge in the objects of the world. No matter what it will imagine, achieve, or happen, there is no refuge there. All there is actually a dream that appears then to be believed to be real, and then apparently suffering begins. Therefore he realized there is no refuge there. That means the mind is ready to turn away. Turn away means not that the habits would not spring and release themselves. Turn away means is not going to create new outgoing. And he compares it. Just as water is the only thing to put out the flames when the hair of one's head is on fire, so also a sage such as you is the sole refuge of people like me who are on fire from three kinds of distress. He says, basically he compares it water and fire and flames. The self is the water, and the fire is identifying with the thoughts to be a physical body, an object. So this is when there is fire. So the only way is knowledge. It's actually a turn off, take off the fire. When there is this understanding, this means the mind is mature. The mind is ready because it understands now fully that there is no hope. There is no hope going out to the objects of the world. There is no hope getting attached to the dream, thinking this is going to bring anything. There is no hope. And then he says, you are free from the illusion of samsara, calm in mind, sunk deep in the incomparable bliss of Brahman, the Self, which is beginningless and endless. Certainly you can save this poor creature. Basically, here, in a very wise way, it starts to plant the seed for the mind. What is the self? And it is pointing, the self is free from illusion, which is clear. Okay? So again, it's not talking to an individual. Okay? the self is free from an illusion, like the screen is free from the movie that is projected on the screen. He says, calm in mind and sunk deep means the mind is equanimous, is indifferent to what's not reactive. The mind is clear. This is why cultivating a mind that is indifferent to what appears thoughts and sensations. This is basically the whole universe. Okay? The mind is not reacting to the objects of the world. The mind is reacting to other thoughts about the objects. The mind reacting to thoughts about the sensation. That's all that it is reacting to. Because we see an object, the moment the mind labels it, then there is a sensation, either it likes it or dislikes it. And then he continues. The mind is sunk deep in the incomparable bliss of Brahman, the self, means the self is, you cannot compare it to anything, which is now beginningless and endless. Beginningless and endless implies no change, because it has no point it began. Anything that begins implies change. Anything that ends implies change. And the self is beginningless, endless, therefore it is changeless. Because it is changeless, now any change is not the real self. So when the thoughts appear, they are changing. So then discrimination can happen. This is not the self. This is not real. Because the only thing that is real is the self. So that discrimination clears all the clutter that covers the reality. And then he ends up, certainly you can save this poor creature. Means this self, which is beginningless and endless, can save the poor creature. Means the self is the only refuge. So the mind returns back to the self. That's the only refuge for the mind. So it returns to the self. That's how it saved this creature. And this creature is just a mental image in the mind. Because the body is a conceptual image in the mind and not the opposite. Because when there is no thought, there is no body. Okay? So the body and the world is dependent on the thought for its existence. And we recognize it also, it's even when the five senses shut down, the whole objective world disappears, means the gross body disappears. Therefore, the object and the world are subordinate to the five senses. And subordinate, obviously, to the mind. This is why when you work with the thoughts, and you master the mind by not identifying with the mind, you master the whole universe. The whole universe is subordinate to the mind. Yet you come to realize that there's even nothing to master because it's not even real. So you leave it alone. And this is what he pointed him from the beginning. He said, leave the samsara, means leave the mind that identifies with the past and believes the future to be real alone. Stop feeding this energy. Stop letting the mind wander and identify there and dream. So basically there's continuing a little bit of dialogue there, and then at a certain point he begins, the master, well said my son, you are intelligent and well disciplined, because he has already practiced, this disciple, and he realized what's the only refuge. He realized that there is no refuge in the dream. Means he's ready. He's competent. He says there is no need to prove competence to be a disciple. Your words clearly show that you are fit. Now look here, my child. Also here it's interesting because all this ego identification is just like a child. The ego behaves like a child. It reacts to something imaginary. It throws a tantrum. It's just like a child. The mother he's in the room, she turns off the light, she walks away, and he now starts dreaming that there is a ghost. And he screams and cries, and she comes back and says there is no ghost. And he says, no, there is ghost. And I can't be here alone, and I won't be able, he just exaggerates, makes from nothing that it imagines something, yet it remains nothing. Yet for the child that believes that there is something is deluded, it cannot see, so the mother has to lead him, to calm him down, to see that there is nothing. The same, identifying with the thoughts doesn't make the thoughts to be real. Therefore it's like a child, behaving like a child, reacting when it doesn't get what it wants. When it is upset, it punishes others and itself. It doesn't realize that the only one who suffers is that mind. So its behavior is immature. That's the ego. He continues, in the Supreme Self of being knowledge bliss, he already starts to direct the mind. What is your true nature? Who can be the transmigrating being? Who can be apparently born or die, or in the self is changeless. There is nobody there. You are just dreaming that there is somebody is born and die. How can this samsara be? Means already it is pointing that the true being, the self, is unrelated to the dream. It has no relationship with thoughts. It is no relationship with images. The thoughts do not touch it. And then the master continues, what have given rise to it? And how and whence can it arise itself? Being the non-dual reality, how can you be deluded? Already is pointing, who you are is the non-dual. Means, what is non-dual? Non-dual means there is no I and you, I and this. Basically, it alone exists. It doesn't recognize anything other than itself, because it's non-dual. How can you be deluded with nothing separate in deep sleep, not having changed in any manner, and having slept soundly and peacefully? A fool, on waking, shouts out, I am lost. How can you, the changeless, formless, again he's pointing what your true nature, changeless, formless, supreme blissful self, shout, I transmigrate, I am miserable, and so on. Truly, there is neither birth nor death, no one to be born or to die, nothing of the kind. For the mind that identifies itself with the physical body, to think there is neither birth nor death, it's not cannot be comprehended. And the only reason, it's because the only experience for the mind is I am a physical body and therefore I am born, I am dying. And not only that, I'm looking at other objects and I see they have a beginning, they have an end. I see children born and I see children or adults or older people die. So how is it that I have neither birth nor death? It's because he's pointing and speaking from the vantage point, from the point of view of the silence, of the self, of the stillness, which is non-dual and absolute. Unless there is a direct experience of that, this cannot ever be understood mentally from the point of view of I'm a physical body. So we're going to stop for now with the non-dual.